time facilitates communication. So we want to literally change the word but or however to and. However and but basically says, ignore everything I just said, and here's the other shoe. In fact, what we are set up for as human beings is when someone says but, we are prepping for the negative. Look, I thought the other day you did a really good job, but now what is all the brain thinking? What did I not do well? Waiting for the negative. Now, in fact, in sales, they say reverse that. So when you're sort of qualifying your product or your service, you're dealing with some opposition or some objections, switch it. You say the negative thing first, but this is why we're really great. And what that does from a psychological standpoint is it allows them to receive the positive. So, little tiny things to adjust in communication, which make a massive, massive difference. All right, so the balloon exercise says that these are the main sort of concepts that will allow us to manage interactions, communicate more effectively, etc., etc. We spoke about what do I want, which was really defining our objectives. So thinking about sort of if I'm going to go have a conversation, what's the objective, right? Who am I, who are they, which is what are the ego states, right? Ask, don't tell, adult-to-adult communication. Do you remember what PRAT stands for? People respond as treated, which is that the ego state addresses the ego state that responds, and then listening. This becomes more of a circular process versus a linear process, because dialogue is round. And what we want to look at these pieces is checkpoints. Like they're gates. So one of the things that, if you know anything about technology or coding or development in general, there's something called gates. And it says when someone has gotten through that first phase, there's a gate, which means we don't go to gate 2 until we've done all these checks. You could look at it from a quality assurance or a regulatory standpoint as well, gates. These are like gates for communication. Let me make sure that I've checked in with these pieces to make sure that I've answered all of them and I'm prepped and ready. Now we said the number one thing is the objective. The objective is the thing that I focus on the most. As an angry child, when I'm hooked, the first thing I'm focusing on is what is my objective? Because if I'm not focusing on my objective, I'm focusing on the person, what they've just said, what the behavior was, what the communication was, what they didn't answer. And as angry childs, we're very reactive and we get defensive pretty quickly. Critical parents, if I'm not careful, I focus on why they're an idiot, why they haven't moved fast enough, what they've done wrong. As a nurturing parent, I focus a little bit on like, oh my gosh, how are they feeling? Are they okay with all of this? Spontaneous childs are not focused, right? They're like bing, 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 bing. They're all over the place. Withdrawn childs are really focused on like, how do I get out of this conversation as quickly as possible? And once again, the angry child is like, how do I not kill this person? So here's the interesting thing about the brain. The brain can only think of one thing at a time. Now, interesting, do you know how many thoughts we have on average per minute? 2,000 to 3,000 thoughts on average we could have per minute. What's interesting about that is it's one thought at a time. Right? Now, we can only speak about 200 to 300 words per minute. So the other concept in this, the challenge with communication sometimes, back to where you said, like, I've got to give them this, I've got to tell them. When we're doing the telling and the talking, sometimes what happens is their brain is like a fan spinning around and those words are just bouncing off. This is why sometimes you've been in interactions where you've gone back to the person and been like, did you not hear anything we spoke about before? Or were you not paying attention? Or did you not get it? Or are you not following? And it's usually because we're doing a lot of the telling and the talking and their brain is just spinning. So one of the ways we introduce or interrupt that, a better way of doing it, will be sort of like take a stick and we stick it in their spinning wheel and it stops the wheel from spinning, is by asking questions. The reason we're asking questions is we're activating that adult side of their personality, that frontal lobe, because it is only this that can process the question. So number one, what do I want? So back to this, if you notice, these rules also are framed in questions, because if questions work for other people, then they work for myself. And that's where I'm able to sort of get myself back. All right, what's my objective here? You know what? We need to reprioritize this list. We need to gain additional resources. We need to ensure there's consistency in following this process. Excellent. That's what I'm going to focus on. Because if you don't focus on that, you're going to focus on them. And sometimes you need to trick yourself. You need to write it down in front of you. And as the person's coming at you, you're like, oh my God, what's my objective? That's it. And your objective isn't to breathe deep and to calm down, right? Those are things that you do along the way to help us get there. Question number 2, and this becomes very important, is I got to do this next gate. Who's driving right now? And has my ego state, the ego state, am I in the right ego state in order to pick that objective? Because if I'm an angry child, we're going to pick something called a preference. So the difference between what do I want is we will answer that through the adult ego state or the parent or the child. Now, when the parental ego state answers that question, or the child ego state answers that question, we're creating something called the preference, your emotional need, what you would like to have happen. So what does a critical parent like the most? What's their natural need? What do they like the most? Control, absolutely. You're doing it my way, you listen to this, you're moving fast enough, like I've controlled it. Control is the ultimate sort of driver for the critical parent. So what do I want? I want to feel in control. I want them to listen to me. I want them to do what I tell them to do. I want them to hurry up, right? I want them to not be an idiot. This is the critical parent stuff. Angry child, I want them to go do anatomically incorrect things to themselves. I just want to kill everyone. Right? Anyone been there? You're that? Like there's a lot of scenarios, you just like that. You have that sort of washover where you just want to kill them. It's just me. Yeah, thank you, right? I'm like, I'm not the only abnormal one, am I? There's got to be another unicorn in the room. You just want to strangle them sometimes, right? We get frustrated. Withdrawn child, what do I want? What do you think the withdrawn child wants as a preference? Leave me alone. Don't bother me. Don't make me feel uncomfortable. Don't put me on the spot. Don't ask me to do that. Spontaneous child, what do they want? Yeah, or just have fun, right? Like, as long as it feels fun, they're happy. But the second it becomes a mundane task or something like a process, I get bored with it. So I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to do it this way. Nurturing parents, obviously the want is usually around service of others. The adult is going to think about the objective, and the objective is very simply put, what is the outcome to this interaction? And we'll go through the 3 questions that we need to ask ourselves. Now, what do I want? I check again, is it my adult that just picked this? Or is it my withdrawn or angry or spontaneous or critical parent? Which one's driving right now? Now I got to remember, who are they? And who are they is also hosted by that concept of Pratt, right? So I'm going to think about the whole not getting hooked and keeping adult to adult, and Pratt as its own sort of overarching rule. And the way we want to look at this is we're going to look at this process as a circle, and Pratt and adult to adult is anchored in the middle. Now, the whole concept of don't get hooked. As we're learning these things, the reality is we begin the interactions, people don't actually respond the way we want them to. So we plan it all out and we get the unexpected transaction, the negative one. So I do the adult to adult thing with them and they whack back at that child or that parent. This is the reminder that people respond as treated, I'm going to respond as treated. So let me be prepped. What is going to trigger you or hook you in this situation? We write them down. When the person makes excuses, when they're not taking responsibility, when they've got 17 answers for a simple question. These are things that are going to trigger me, and when we say trigger or get hooked, that's when you're taken out of your adult ego state and it becomes the child ego state that is driving the parental behavior. So your frustrations now drive the critical parent, or your withdrawn child now drives the nurturing parent. Right? We back off. Let me follow the rule of ask, don't tell, and if I do that, I need to listen to the answer to then redefine my objective if appropriate. And we keep going round and round and round and round, because this is how a conversation is going to go. We're always stopping over at these points. What's my objective? Who am I? Who are they? Am I getting hooked? Am I keeping adult to adult? Let me come back to the questions. And one of the things we want to prep in these interactions are multiple questions that I'm going to open the interaction up with. I'm going to prep for some of their responses. I'm not going to be a mind reader. I'm not going to predict things. But if I've interacted with this person before, if I've had some sort of experience with them, I'm going to think about what might be some of their responses in this interaction, positive and negative, and how am I now going to either reply or handle that. So for example, let's do the one that you guys came up. Person's not following the procedure. Well, let me prep. Well, they've already given me one, which is it's not a big deal. What's the big deal? Right? I'm getting it done anyway. How do we reply to that? Critical parent's going to say it is a big deal. Follow the damn process. Well, what's the adult going to phrase this as? We might sort of move into things like transferring responsibility. Well, can I share the reasons it's important for us to follow the process? Okay, fine. All right, well, hold on a second. Are you in a position to hear what's important about this? Okay, fine. Well, hold on a second. I'm noticing that your position right now is maybe a little defensive or resistant. Am I picking something up here, or are you actually in a defensive position right now? I'm not saying you're acting defensive. I'm saying, look, I've noticed this. Like, what's up with that? Like, can you tell me more about your position right now? Because I'm noticing that it seems, from a perception standpoint, that you're a little defensive. Am I reading this correctly, incorrectly? Like, are you? Like, what's up? Now, just because I say it up in the front of the room doesn't mean that this is exactly what you're going to do. And certain conversations like that, which are difficult conversations, we need to go there. Not with everyone. Right? This is not the 90%. This is the 10% that every once in a while we bump up against that very sort of strong personality. And like anything, I would be very thoughtful around how do my questions support us moving to the objective, and how do they support transferring responsibility? Because I could change that question, which is, do you realize you're acting like an asshole? Right? Woo! Whoosh, whack. That's where we've sort of, used the question, but we've broken all the rules, right? Because people respond as treated. It's not actually seeking insight from the individual. It's pushing them into child. You got to think about that. Like, as I'm interacting, does this help move them into the adult? Does it help activate their adult? Does it help transfer responsibility? If yes, awesome. If not, we might find that we're pushing them into child. And then, of course, listen. And the joke about that is, the more we shut up, the better. Specifically when dealing with withdrawn childs, because the withdrawn childs don't answer it fast enough, and we fill in that gap as long as needed. It sometimes feels like an eternity, but it's actually not. It's like 30 seconds, 27 seconds. So pay attention to those withdrawn childs, that if you wait long enough, they'll come out. In fact, the greatest gift we give the withdrawn child is time. So I ask the question, and I give them some time to sort of sit and process and then come back with it. Sometimes it's even the 24-hour rule with the withdrawn child, which is, look, can you and I get together tomorrow to talk about X, Y, and Z? And today I really want you to sort of think about it, and I want you to come prepared tomorrow with these things. And they'll go sit with that because they need that processing time. And then this comes also back just the checking up versus the checking in. It's a completely different tonality with someone, right? Is the list done versus how's the list going? And as we start to do this, you think the amazing thing about this is the sooner we do this stuff from a place of communication, the faster they're able to take on responsibility and then meet the expectations, meet the performance, right? Raise their bar of expectations.